The Southern and Great Western Railways were always great competitors with each other, and they were both praised for both luxury and speed. During the 1930s, it was the Great Western that came out on top when it came to all these factors. But arguably, this spurred the Southern Railway into making a certain class of express locomotive, of which Shaw was a proud member. Being built in 1941 and allocated to Radmoore in 1957, he is proved to be sometimes arrogant but a respectable locomotive. Shaw had recently failed at Durmont with a hot axle box. After he was towed from Durmont to Brighton on an outbound stopping goods, Mr. Norden had found himself in engine shortage. While he did request for Felix to be reallocated to Radmoore, and he had Winston and Gilbert, of course, there proved to be too much work between the engines for them to cope. So Mr. Norden requested BR to send an engine from the west on a temporary loan. With that, Mr. Norden gave Shaw's jobs to Felix, Felix's to Gilbert's, and the visiting engine would do Gilbert's trip workings and shunting. The tank engine arrived over an hour earlier than expected. It was already sorting the yard just as the sun went below the horizon line.
Good evening, sir.
This was probably the first time in years that an engine came to say hello to Mr. Norden personally.
Good evening. What is your name?
Hey there, name's William. Everybody calls me Willie. You see, sir, we all had short names back home, sir. My friend Monty, for example.
That will do, William. It is. Carry on. You're doing a fine job with the cars.
Alright, I'll try.
He said as he went to go collect more vans. Mr. Norden was impressed with William. However, Winston couldn't feel more different about the new tank engine. I couldn't find my blooming goods train this morning. Scotch always puts it by the track nearest to the platform, but the Weston had put it, by the goods shed.
Naturally, after all, I hadn't loaded your train yet, so it would just take up extra space.
Oh, well, fair enough. But still, he doesn't talk much, does he?
Not all the engines are chatterboxes his Blancos. Some engines do better when they concentrate on the job at hand, and besides, he's busy. I'm sure he'll talk to you later. Well, I got to go. See you later, Winston.
Winston, however, remained dubious. That night, William joined the rest of the fleet in the sheds. So I said to my driver, there's no way that Aston will win the cup this year. It'll be Rotherham's year, I'm sure it will.
Unless, of course, my friend Thornton has anything to do with it.
Gilbert said, and Felix joined into the conversation.
I took a soccer special back home once. Birmingham took it to Dover and I took it back.
William was confused.
Is it a football? Or is it a locomotive thing? I'm genuinely confused.
He asked, and Winston smirked. Oh, I heard of a entry class in the eastern region that was sometimes named after famous football teams.
Hey, like Bristol Swindon.
All the engines, even Gilbert, exploded with laughter. William felt offended. Winston stopped laughing and began explaining. We're not trying to be mean to you. I'm sure they're both great teams, but they're just not in the running for the cup this year.
But why ever not? Everyone has a chance at it.
Gilbert smiled and encouraged William.
Well said. That's the spirit, mate.
Winston snorted, and William gave him a sidelong glance.
You know, we had a saying in Swindon. There's the great Western way to do things, and the wrong way. And I'm great Western, and...
No, you're not. No more than we're Southern. Besides, weren't you built a whole year after nationalization in 1949? Winston looked to Gilbert, a northeastern design, for support, but Gilbert was looking thoughtful.
We are what we think we are.
Winston's smile turned to a frown. But it says on your tanks and tenders, property of British Railways.
Well, yes, but I don't mean in a tangible sense. Just because something's gone physically doesn't mean it's gone as a whole. Plus, I was built by the LNER, so I can't really speak for you here, Winston.
Well, fair enough, but I thought we were talking about football. Gilbert chuckled, but William kept silent as he listened to the Andrews reminisce about soccer matches they heard about, or even Gilbert's arcade scene. He dozed off, dreaming about Bristol Town and how one day he would like to see them play. Every Thursday, a fish train would arrive from the main network. It had been Felix's job, but with Shaw away being repaired, he had been doing the semi-fast passenger trains. Therefore, it was up to Gilbert to take the train on to the local towns along the line. When the train arrived early that morning, Gilbert was to report to Sutton. While William was already wide and awake, arranging the yard, he arranged the train and left it for Gilbert to take. The foreman, of course, did not tell William that Felix was not to take the train, so he had him add extra wagons to the already heavy train. Felix had already left with the morning commute, so there was no chance of swapping the engines out. Gilbert was coupled to the train.
Bye, Willie. I'll see you this evening.
Willie watched as Gilbert pulled off with the train. Gilbert pulled off from the yard with relative ease. This was because Sutton was located on a downward slope, so the weight of the train wasn't on him just yet. Gilbert passed Sutton Station and Lynchville Junction without any trouble at all. Everything seemed fine. That was until he reached the hill outside of Dermont, the middle point of the railway. As Gilbert climbed the gradient, he could feel his wheels slipping and his pistons wheezing.
It's never been this far before. This train is so heavy.
And before anything could be done, Gilbert stalled on the hill, gasping for breath. The guard immediately went to go contact the yard foreman at Sutton, and Gilbert's crew rolled him back down the hill. Gilbert, although thankful for the rest, was worried.
What will happen if I do that again? What happened to us again? We're gonna get back here to help us.
They waited for the next train, which turned out to be Felix's morning commute.
Go it, Gilbert.
He called as he disappeared into the morning fog. 10 minutes later, the banker arrived in the shape of a very worried-looking William. Gilbert was happy to see him and explained the misunderstanding.
It appears the Great Western Way didn't account for you.
Well, it's my old clef involved here, and the cylinders that let me down. So, what do you say, William? Shall we take this hill together?
Indeed, but this time, let's be our engines.
Gilbert whistled to William and he began pushing. With enough effort, the duo began to pick up speed. William gave all he could to keep the train moving, and with steam bursting from his cylinders, he helped the train over the top and into the station the other side. As they reached the base of the next gradient, they stopped the build at boiler pressure, and with a shrill whistle and a gust of wind, Winston thundered by with the morning express. That evening, Winston had heard all about it. Well, he did make up for his mistake earlier, and that takes balls, so he can't be all bad. Gilbert smiled, and he was so exhausted that he fell asleep on the spot.
Is he gonna be alright, sir?
The pannier tank asked. Oh, he's like that all the time. I hope you had a good day, little Winston.
Little Winston, why I ought to.
But then he saw Winston laughing. You're alright, Willie. Anyways, what's Swindon like?
It's large. There's a lot of engines everywhere. You would have to blow up steam so loudly to get hurt most of the time.
The two engines talked into the night, one southern, one western, but both amazingly British.